All right, Link. I really enjoyed that score. I love how different it sounds. There are similarities between this and some other scores that I've evaluated, but this one just really has just a difference to it. There's something, I'm not going to say unique, but there's something very personal about it that just, I mean, that bodes well for you um, and your style of orchestration. Okay, so let's talk about a few things in here. Okay, um, I feel that your horn right here at the beginning it absolutely does not need tenuto marks over it. None of these instruments do. Okay, and also it should be marked down to pianissimo. Okay, so it just has to be softer than the other instruments around it. Um, right here you've got sounding F sharp in your A clarinet, and then B in the middle, and you have E on top. So you have the strongest instrument playing the top note, and it'll have a tendency to overwhelm the other things around it. So I think it is possible to do this, but you just have to be ready to accept that the overtones from this sounding E are going to interfere to an extent with the oboe, right? So if this were English horn instead of actual, actual horn in F, French horn in F, then that wouldn't be an issue. So I would say, look, if you really want to preserve this, then think about giving this note to English horn instead of French horn, and then you'd have like the perfect blend, and then that could also be marked piano rather than pianissimo. But the only way this is going to work is if you bring this down. And then you sort of have to think about the accompaniment. In the piano part, the melody is obviously swelling with this nuance, right? It's da da da, right? So it is crescendo, diminuendo. But the accompaniment isn't doing that, right? The accompaniment is just this chord being held down by the pianist's left hand, and a single note is changing, right? It's B to A sharp. So there really isn't anything implied that is really a crescendo about that B to A sharp, and nothing that motion would not make the rest of the chord louder. So I would just say to you and to everybody else who has submitted an entry that I just feel like there's really no need for the accompaniment to swell the way that to have any kind of nuances necessarily like the melody does. All right, then going on, ba, same thing. No need for the accompaniment to have any nuances. Ba, 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 ba. So you have to decide, what do these crescendo marks mean? Does it mean to get louder and then drop down and get louder again? Or should you just consolidate them into one long hairpin? Justin Toki, who I just evaluated a couple of scores ago, just had his hairpins just consolidated into one. So that's an example of just trying to get away from things that just repeat themselves so much that they start to look meaningless, right? Okay. Now, in a situation like this, I really need to know how many of each you got at the beginning of the score, right? So, flute, oboe, clarinet in A, bassoon. It probably would have been easier if you said 3 flutes, 2 oboes. And see, like here, you're putting the English horn in amongst the oboes. It's really better for the English horn to have its own staff, okay, and just like drop that in. So English horn should have its own staff and its own name at the beginning, right? So two oboes, English horn, I'm guessing like two clarinets, right? And then two bassoons and so on. All right, so just try to mark that, how many horns in F. If it's four horns, then there should be two staves with the first and second on the top and the third and fourth on the bottom and so on. How many trumpets, how many trombones. So you got to put that information at the beginning. All right, so other than that sort of, those details, it's actually fairly well scored. I'm not so sure that you need so much of a big cushion here, in terms of like playing every single note, like having a 7-part harmony underneath your violin melody here. Consider that, at least in string scoring, it's not necessary to have every single note in a big chord of the piano, right? It's nicer to just like you can even get away with like 4-part harmony or 3-part harmony even, and give some of the more complex harmony to the other instruments, winds, maybe even brass in a certain situation. Okay, so other than those quibbles, it's not bad at all. All right, now going on to clarinet. And I really like the way that you're dividing this up, into more bowable divisions. Da 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 da, and so on. And this was nice. Okay, I really really liked this. The way that we've got clarinet and oboe dividing up the upper harmony note and the central, the middle voice of melody. And this is kind of neat. I think that it might be a little bit of a drag on the bass, just kind of might make the bass feel a little thick to really just have the contrabassoon continue on and hold down everything along with the basses, right? It's gonna result in a very dense, low bass sound that isn't playing octaves or anything. There's nothing to spread out so it's just going to be this very lone, very very low sound of the contra plus the basses. I like the half pizzicato, half arco thing. That's kind of cool. Okay, and then the clarinet plus the violins gives it a very, just a very direct sound. And, Divisi, first violin plus oboe, that's great. Which oboe, first or second? This is kind of interesting. You've got mezzo staccato violins followed by, this is weird. You've got tenuto divisi, lower divisi note here, but not on the other notes. So I would just say don't do this. Just I think you wanted this dun 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 dun. You sort of want that resolution, and you're kind of supplying that here with the. But it would be better. It would be better to just double what the English horn is doing in the second voice. Okay. The only thing that I think is a problem here, the biggest problem, if there is a problem, okay, is the fact that these two resolution motives are so much the same, right? You have strong, then you've got this lone horn voice, and then you got this strong again, and then you have this lone English horn voice. Really, it just becomes kind of a solo on the resolution because you dropped out here and any kind of doubling. So, it just kind of feels like not an echo, just like it feels like a repeat, right? Not an echo. And the other problem too is that you've got this. You've got beautiful slurs in your flutes and clarinets, but you have mezzo staccato in your strings. So why couldn't the flutes and clarinets be mezzo staccato too, right? Why couldn't we match the articulation there? Okay, and now we finally have our bum 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 bum. Yeah, so and like just notice how messy this gets when you have English horn on the same line as the oboe part, right? It just really needs its own staff, even if it's just for one, a couple of notes, right? But yeah, this is all fine. The scoring right in here. That all works good. And I really like the, da, da, da. Yeah, I like the bowing there. Okay, boom, da, 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 dum. Bassoon plus cello, harps, pizzicato. Yeah, that all works great. Yeah, and so here we're really seeing the dangers of compressing four horn parts onto one staff, right? It just becomes just too strange. And here, you're giving the second part. It's like so -4. So you don't want you want that to be the second player on the bottom, and then here you want the fourth player on the. And yeah, I mean it's just too much stuff. All right, next time make this into 2 staves. I'm wondering if there was like a limitation on how many staves you could have in your score. Yeah, okay, but anyways, look, just next time score it out on a full 2 staves, and have a separate staff for your English horn as well, okay? Okay, so I really like this in here. This is really, really cool. Yeah, really fun stuff in here. I kind of feel that the cellos doubling the trombones is not quite enough. I think the cello should be doubling bassoon, doubling the third trombone. And I think that would stabilize it a lot better. So, like cellos plus trombones in this kind of exposed way, I feel is just, I don't think that the sounds really cross over. They don't really merge as well. So if you add a bassoon to that, then you get something that will bring the two timbres together in a much better way. Okay, so why are you going da 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 and you're going da da in your trumpets? Why the difference? I mean, it's not enough just that we're bowing here. It's like there's the fact that you have an emphasis on the third beat, right? Da. So why can't the trumpet player do that too? Da da tongue, right? Da tongue tongue. It's so much stronger than just going ba. And same thing with your horns, right? Why can't everybody and just look at what you are asking your first trombonist to do, to slur from G up to this F. And then I mean, what does this mean? Slur over 2 notes that are the same note. How's that supposed to work? All right, so really just think of this, right? And this is strange with 4, right? So, I mean, I think you're trying to say I'll have 4 players playing on these 3 notes. What you really need here would be to have, I would say, to double the top note. So that would be the first and the third playing the 2 top notes. All right, so don't do this. That isn't something. Just, double any notes so you can have a double note like the unison note to the side. If you're going to be really boiling everything down to one staff like this, which by the way I don't recommend. Yeah, don't put in A4. Okay, that means something else. that would mean 4 voices on one note. Okay. Yeah, I would bring in the contrabassoon right in here, right? To build a bridge between the tuba and the cellos. All right, so we get to the scoring of this final chord here. So you split it up so that it's the flutes are doubling the violins first and second, the violas, which by the way you should go to treble clef right about here. So the violas are doubling the clarinets, and then bassoon is getting this note here with the cellos. Okay, so just it's great that you have gotten most of the strings and winds out of the way of the brass. Okay, so that's admirable. It's more or less going to work, but it's still not going to balance, right? Because if you went to mezzo piano here in the brass and then to mezzo forte, okay, or even just piano crescendo to forte, or excuse me, piano crescendo to mezzo forte is how I would do it. Okay, and then kept your strings and your winds forte, then you would have a balance. Okay, and then this is nice here, this little resolution here at the end. That works fine. All right, so here we get to our restatement of the opening. Ba, da, 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 da. Yeah, I mean, do you want to really have that much, really use the full bow? Like when you mark a tenuto mark on a violin part, that means that you're using the full bow, so it has kind of a zoom, kind of a, da 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 da, zoom da zoom da zoom da zoom da zoom. You know what I mean? I just feel it's over emphatic on that third beat to put a tenuto on there. I mean, especially since you're not supporting that tenuto with any kind of doubling of the articulation in the wind at all, right? So it's kind of meaningless. Like you're having your first violins go zoom, and your flute is just kind of making a beautiful little articulated phrase come to an end there, right? Or slur will come to an end there, right? Flute 1 plus piccolo. All right, so this is just too confusing. You should have a separate staff for your piccolo, and you should write the piccolo part on it. Because I don't know if this is intended to be a unison, which I guess wouldn't work, because a piccolo can't play a low A natural like this. So I'm assuming that you mean that this would be octaves, right? So it's just really deceiving, right? And then here, if this is flute 1 plus piccolo, there's no way that the piccolo could play this low G sharp, right? It can't play below D in the staff at concert pitch. All right, but we will get to this. This is problematic here at 40. I like the celesta here. This is beautiful. I like the harp. That works great. The dynamics here need to balance better. Harp should be marked like mezzo piano or even mezzo forte. Celesta, mezzo piano or mezzo forte. Okay, and then everything else is fine. You don't have any dynamics in here, so it's fine if you don't want to. If you don't want to have this phrase breathe, it's fine. But just feel like there could be a little bit more of a nuance in here. All right, so now we're getting to the end of the piece. Bum, 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 and so on. Okay. Now, why does this? Yes. Okay. So, like, you're asking flutes to play inside clarinets, and that will really kind of not work. Okay. It's just not going to balance out very well, right? I mean, you would be better off with Divisi violas on these two pitches, and it would just sound better and it would balance better with everything going on. All right, cellos and clarinets in octaves. That's okay. Okay, I think we just saw this in the last evaluation. Once again, violas are a better companion at octaves in this kind of scoring with clarinet. Okay, once again, half pizzicato and half arco. So I just feel that, it is better to have your pizzicato note written as a quarter note or a half note in the second voice and just write pizzicato under it and then arco over the top. Okay, that's better than just writing this out divisi half pizzicato half, because it's just kind of sloppy, right? Okay, and then celesta, bum 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 bum. This is nice. I like the da da, and like a different slur in the violas. Yeah, that's all nice. Now we've got oboe and bassoon in octaves with viola on the bottom. Now here, like I mentioned before, cello is a better blend than viola. I mean, viola and bassoon actually make a really beautiful team. So don't get me wrong. That's not what I intend to say. It's just that the cello's overtones will contribute more to the oboe than will the violas. Okay, just the cello's more urgent timbre will, it has more body of tone in its tenor register, which in turn will help push at the oboe above it, right? Whereas the viola doesn't have the same urgency in its middle register. Okay, and then this is really pretty much scored the same exact way. It's divisi strings kind of floating their way down. So, the only problem that I really see with this approach here is that there kind of is there's no sustain to the harmony. Like you can see these big gaps here, these big empty spaces, right? So basically, you're just saying, I want the harmony to finish here, and then there's nothing, right? And then all we hear is just like the strings descending. But that's not what happens in the piano part, is it? In the piano part, you have the melody hanging in the air because of pedal for 2 more bars, and the harmony as struck by the hands continue on, right? And this kind of keeps holding underneath the kind of cascading figures as they float downwards. So probably in all of these cases you could have just had more. Okay, and now let's talk about the problematic nature of this scoring. Okay, so essentially you've got you've got 2 6/3 triads here, with flute on top and clarinet on the bottom. Okay, so it will work even though your flutes are really getting down into a very low place, but it won't balance, if you know what I mean, right? So because the clarinets are going to be are going to be a much more secure sound in their chalumeau register, and the flutes in their first octave, excuse me, in their first octave, with the lowest note competing with a horn at the same exact dynamic, it's just really, you're barely going to hear the flutes at all. They're going to get blown out by the clarinets and the horn right in here. So you could lose the horn. You could maybe just rescore this so that maybe the bottom note was English horn instead of flute, and maybe the G could be played by the second oboe, and then the top note of the C could be doubled by 2 flutes, and then you would save this. This would all balance. Okay. All right, and then just one single pluck by the harp. you're trying to keep this really delicate, and I appreciate that. Now, remember how I was just talking a second ago about how this gap, just, it's just sort of like empty space underneath the cascading strings, and that's not really what happens in the piano part. There's also the sense that crescendo to mezzo forte and then sudden silence it's like a cliff. It's like your harmony is going, da, sudden silence. And then here you're pushing up to a forte on some pretty powerful notes here. Like you got 4-part harmony in your horns. You're going all the way up to this E here, and ending on the A, big old written D major chord, and suddenly it stops, and you have these floaty things coming down. You will hear all of the music just stopping, right? And that is like almost like the sudden absence of the sound is like a percussive effect. It's sort of like a negative space kind of effect. The audience may, like in a live situation where there's less processed echo or whatever, the audience may perceive that sudden interruption much more, much more keenly than you suspect. All right. Okay, and so yeah, we talked about that. Now here we've got cello supporting horn. It's on the same pitches with the flutes above. That's all actually good. I like that a lot. Okay. Then celesta kind of floating down with and then we've got like our last big push. Piccolo. We've got 2 clarinets. We've got and this. Yeah, I mean, this desperately needs to be stretched across 2 different staves. And I don't get this. A2, A4. So, yeah, just don't do this, okay? Next time you do one of these challenges or prepare a score for something like this, just give me 2 staves, give me a separate staff for your English horn. Okay, just go ahead, make it, you can make it bigger, have it more squeezed in between the staves, or have a slightly smaller staff size. Okay. Okay, and harp. Okay, so is this arpeggiated, or is this supposed to be rolled? Or okay. So clarinet, doubling, flute, and I'm guessing that means piccolo an octave higher, and first violin. Okay, that's all fine. And then, of course, with this big of a tutti and this sudden silence, that will just really be felt underneath the harp. So I would really recommend, nobody will be able to hear this note on the harp. And suddenly there will be like the sound of the hall just subsiding, and vaguely the harp will come out of that. I don't think that's what you want. What if you went mezzo forte crescendo to forte on the downbeat, and then diminuendo to pianissimo by the end of the bar right when the harp comes in? All right, I think that's what you need there. Now, bum, 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 bum. I think that this came in early. This is, it's supposed to be da 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 dum, bum, 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 bum. You kind of stuck your little horn counter melody a couple bars early from where it's supposed to be. Okay. Okay, and that's all fine. Yeah. Celesta, flute and oboe, and piccolo. So like you're forming a triple octave here. Okay, so just be careful. If you really are sending your piccolo up to a high G sharp, high F sharp, high G sharp, those notes will tend to whistle. All right? Even at a very soft dynamic, they'll have a slight edge to them, or even more than a slight edge to them. Okay? They're hard to control for the piccolo player. So pretty much any note above high E. For the piccolo player, you can't get that same, beautiful soft quality going so high. So just watch out for that. I mean, it would be better for you to have the piccolo playing an octave lower and to have like solo violin or maybe a few desks playing in harmonics if you really need to get that high pitch. But just to let everybody know, there's absolutely no reason why we have to realize every pitch in every register that it is on the piano, right? You could score things in different octaves. They don't always have to be the same octave as the piano. And then that takes the pressure off of things having to be very high and soft with the wrong instruments. Okay, so we kind of, yeah, so here you are thinking that you are going to be able to trade off seamlessly to second flute from first horn. Not at tenuto, accent. Like this will be actually like this kind of bump, and then the audience will very slowly start to hear the soft sound of the second flute come through. So this would need to be, if you really want things to, da 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 da, and then flute. What I would do is I would go down to really soft here, like pianissimo or triple P at the end here on the C sharp. Do not have the horn player play this at all. And then have the second flute come in, like push into the note from pianissimo to piano or mezzo piano, and then come in here so that they trade off before this note. And then I think that would be a much more seamless kind of a dovetailing. Yeah. Okay, now this is completely unnecessary. Let vibrate. The timpani note is not going to last any longer than 3 beats. You do not need to worry about, I mean, does the conductor really want this, right? Most conductors are not going to want the timpani note to be long there. They're going to want to be able to just grab this with their hand. Have you ever seen that gesture by a conductor? They'll like reach out and they'll grab and then they'll pull it back to themselves. So that would mean that everybody could just play this softly, and then right at the end, here's where they would put the gesture probably. They would pull it towards themselves. And I see what you want here. You kind of want the timpani to kind of hang over, but that's actually like the sound of the sustained timpani is not actually that pleasant of a sound if it goes on for too long. Okay, so generally speaking, the timpani starting to vibrate with everything else that's going on, it's like better to just kind of damp it, right? And just to let the sustain of the hall, the reverb of the hall, kind of be the sustain, right? That's what I would recommend here. But even if you really just do want this to be a longer note, I would say just mark it as a dotted half note, and you do not have to say LV on it. Okay, so those are my thoughts about your piece, Link. And once again, hats off to you for a very, very different, very original kind of score. Just some general things, and that is, when you're dealing with celesta, when you're dealing with harp, there's really no way that the harp can compete with things like timpani and brass played at the same dynamic volume, right? So if you have like mezzo forte brass pushing to forte, nobody's going to hear this chord at all. It'll just be obliterated right there on that second beat. Now, if you did like a glissando or a big roll, that would be different. Okay, so or if you did the chord at the beginning, maybe before everybody just really gets committed. So just think about the very, very soft instruments. As I've mentioned in other evaluations, the celesta really is kind of like a baby instrument, right? It's like the baby of the orchestra. So if everybody else is shouting and talking loudly and stuff, nobody can hear that little baby kind of going goo goo gaga, right? And the harp is kind of like the emo of the orchestra. It's kind of that really, the sort of slightly troubled teen in the corner who's mumbling to themselves, right? If you really want to hear how beautiful and elegant and the wonderful things that they have to say, their kind of emotional kind of arc, you cannot bury them with everybody else's blather. Okay, you have to let them, you have to just back off and let them say what they're going to say. Especially if you want the entrance here of the harp to sound like anything at all, right? Then you really have to back off. All right, so those were my general thoughts about this score, and I actually really appreciate that you gave me a lot to talk about, Link. That there were some things in here. I mean, obviously you have a very original voice, and you definitely have your own thoughts about things and everything else. And if there's any advice that I have given you that help you become a better orchestrator or to make this score stronger, then that's great. And if everything I said, actually helps you to sort of have more faith in your ideas in a different way, and just like, oh, forget about Thomas's advice. I actually see why I am right, but I'm going to make it stronger in another way. Then that's good too, right? Whatever makes the score stronger is really what matters in the end. So take whatever advice I've got that is useful and use it. And if it's not, don't worry about it. You'll find out certain things on your own as you get your scores read by orchestras and so on and so forth. Which, speaking of which, it would be great to know that this score got read by an orchestra or some other, maybe a conductor or orchestral musician had a chance to take a look at it, not just me. So don't or maybe just take the lessons that you learned from working on Lili's music, orchestrating it, and put it into your own music, right? That you might have a better chance of orchestrating. So however it works, I hope that this evaluation is useful to you, and thank you so much for supporting the channel for the past couple of months and before, and for being a part of the community. And I really would love to see your take on the next round of evaluations, the next orchestration challenge for 2021, because we're going to go in a completely different direction. And I really like that we are actually able to do that, that each of our pieces that we've orchestrated for the past 4 years has been so different from the other one. And I want to keep that as a tradition, so that we're not just constantly sort of stuck in a very impressionistic place, or in a very modernist place, or in a very angular place, so that we're just like, everything is just constantly, there's some way of bringing some freshness to our orchestration, and would love to have you be part of that, Link. So thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching, and hopefully there will be another evaluation coming very, very soon.